Hey there, this is Carrie. Due to some technical issues, this episode was ready later than we hoped. We're presenting it to you here now. This is also a reminder that the content in this episode is not intended as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The use of the information on the podcast is at the user's own risk. Listeners should contact their doctors or other qualified medical providers for medical advice. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy. Okay. So when we first start to watch the movie, Ellen is in an inpatient facility for ED, and she's a bit of a hellion.
Rebel.
A little bit of a rebel. Not exactly nice. I mean, the first thing, like, she was just being rude in art therapy, and she made a poster that just says, "Eat my skinny balls."
Right.
And I'm like,
but
that is the moment, I like her.
I know. I like her attitude.
Yeah.
But do you remember what she said to the girl who, what were they even?
I don't know. I just know they were in art therapy.
They were in art therapy. The one girl was complaining about something. But Ellen says to her, she's mocking her, right? She's saying, society is to blame. The world's so unfair. I have to die. There's no point in blaming everybody.
I think, yeah, the girl was complaining about just everything, wasn't she?
I think, they were cutting out pictures of magazines.
Yeah.
So I think she was complaining about, they're supposed to make a collage or some kind of a thing, and they're using images from magazines.
Of what they find healthy, maybe, or attractive?
Yeah, I think it was something like that. And she was complaining about that to the therapist.
I have a feeling, I think we find out soon hereafter, that's not the first place she's been asked to leave.
No.
So she's miserable and wants to make sure everyone else is too.
Not to compare it too much to Girl Interrupted, but the opening first scenes or whatever the movie is, Ellen leaving the institution and then Susanna's going to it, right? Coming and going.
Just that idea of being put in a taxi and having the taxi driver look at Ellen through the rearview mirror, and he never says anything, but he's watching her like she's dangerous. So maybe we should talk a little about how she's dressed.
Yeah, there was criticism in the articles that I had read about how Ellen was dressed too. That it was glamorizing anorexia because she's dressed somewhat stylish. I mean, that's not maybe my opinion, but they were talking about how the way Ellen was dressed, that she was wearing a coat and she had the sunglasses.
Yeah, she had like a flannel and maybe a hoodie as well. I saw that and thought, she's trying to hide how thin she is.
I saw that too, but those people saw it differently. They thought Ellen was dressed stylish for, again, this is in 2017 when it came out. It was filmed in 2016, so I can't particularly remember style at that time being, if that was in. The way that Ellen dressed then and throughout the movie, that she's like in style, that anorexia is in style. That was the criticism.
Well, that's stupid because she's obviously from an upper class family who has money to buy those clothes.
Right.
So I don't understand how the criticism can be. How does that make sense? She's dressed too nicely for someone with anorexia. Therefore, they're trying to glamorize it.
I don't know.
I don't understand.
But I think your point is right, though, because if you think about the clothes she's wearing, they're oversized. They don't fit her.
And they have enough room that she can add bulk underneath.
But yeah, I mean, to your point that a cab is taking her home because no one came to get her from the hospital.
It just seems very similar to Susanna being sent.
Right. She's going home, right? Like, that was the whole idea in the movies, she's going home, but it's so impersonal. She goes up to the door and rings the doorbell.
And no one is home.
The housekeeper answers the door.
Yeah, she's greeted by the housekeeper, and she comes in to find out that she doesn't have a bedroom anymore.
Right.
That she now has to go to the garage, which this is a theme of people no longer having a space for her. We see that towards the end of the movie.
Yes.
And it was just, I don't know. I mean, I assumed her sister was at school or something like that.
We see her a little bit later. We see Kelly a little bit later, like a few moments. Like, I mean,
they
time
have
has
dinner.
passed. Yeah. Before they have dinner, when they're sitting in the kitchen, and then that's when her stepmom comes home. Her stepmother, Susan, is the...
I thought her parents were out to dinner. That Susan, the stepmom, and their dad were out to dinner.
Were they?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's why Kelly and Ellen were eating alone.
Oh, I don't remember that part. Okay. What I do remember, you're probably right. What I do remember, though, is when Susan does see Ellen sitting at the table with Kelly, she says, "Sorry, I couldn't pick you up. and just shrugs and says, work. Your stepdaughter's getting out of the hospital. You don't want to come get her. However, a point that kind of gets made throughout the movie is that Ellen is frequently hospitalized for this. And so maybe they were tired of getting her from the hospital.
And they're so frustrated with her.
Yes, they're so frustrated.
Frustrated and scared and don't know what else to do. I couldn't imagine coming home and just being told, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You're in the garage, and it wasn't that nice.
No.
And we see her doing sit-ups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see Ellen doing a lot of things that are like, again, I think it's a representation of what somebody with anorexia could be doing. Like you said, she's exercising. We see her throughout the movie, like she has a cigarette. Commonly, people will use cigarettes and nicotine to help with cravings for food. So we see that a lot.
Well, like in the 90s with those big supermodels like Christy Turlington and...
I mean, Brooke Shields was considered a little bit on the bigger side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they smoked constantly, and Christy Turlington, I believe, when she was young, she had the beginning of emphysema. And I probably should have double-checked that. But, and it was because they all smoked. They didn't eat.
Right.
They smoked cigarettes.
I mean, that was considered a meal, a
Right,
cigarette,
and they
right?
were waifs.
That's...
They'd have coffee and a cigarette. So the dinner game with her stepsister Kelly. Before they start eating, Kelly looks up an app for the calories of the food, and Ellen is really good at guessing the calories by just looking.
Yeah, what did she say that she had? What did Kelly say that Ellen had? Do you remember what she said?
I don't remember.
She said you've got... Oh, what did she say? I think she said either you've got anorexia Asperger's or...
Oh, yeah.
Or calorie Asperger's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. And I remembered thinking, well, that's a gift.
Right.
But also to be that obsessed with it, that
Right.
you know it. So when you have an eating disorder, are there other, like she plays that game in that she knows all of, is that a typical thing with anorexia maybe, that you would know what the calories are?
I think, yeah. I mean,
Even the calories of a booger.
Ellen seemed pretty confident when she was saying how many calories a booger would be, but I definitely think that was a guess. I think that was kind of playing into the joke. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But
it cracked me up.
Because the thing is, so people with disordered eating, they oftentimes, not everybody, right? Again, we're speaking in just general terms. We're talking about like people with eating disorders will count calories because that is one way of thinking of controlling their disorder, is controlling the number of calories they put in their body. The other thing is like people with disordered eating tend to not be very diverse in like what they're eating. So if you think about them eating similar things all the time, they're going to memorize those calories.
Yeah.
They're
because they know. So do they consider those meals safe?
Yeah, I would.
Because that's why they eat them all the time.
Yeah.
Well, and she didn't even eat. She just...
No, you don't see a whole lot of Ellen eating throughout the movie. You see other people eating. Yeah, which we'll get into in a little bit, but calorie Asperger's is what her sister calls it.
So, her parents. Jack, her dad, is never seen.
Yeah, there's one scene with him driving, isn't there?
What was he driving?
Oh no, I'm thinking of the cab driver. Yes, never mind. That was
We never
see
him.
He's just referred.
Well, he sends Susan in as his proxy.
But isn't that funny that like we don't see him in the movie, so he is completely absent. He's the absent father.
Yet that absence is so huge and overwhelming.
Yeah.
Ellen did not win the lottery with parents at all. Also, I wrote down in my notes that this is very much a 1950s household. Dad works and stays out of all emotional work at home. Not seen at all, but speaks through his wife. And she's a step-parent. Like, I would resent that. It's like, you're not even my mom.
So let's think in that relationship with Ellen and Susan. It's very interesting. There are certainly a lot of step-parents that can be very supportive of their stepkids and can be a positive influence in their life. I don't know what Susan is. I
vacillate on her quite a bit.
When I think about this movie, I often come to the thoughts about, you see Susan, after Ellen has come home, after dinner, after Susan gives Ellen that cake that says, "Eat up, Ellen."
Oh, before she goes to...
Yes, and it's a burger. Yeah, but that night, it's like the night that Ellen comes home, she's talking with Susan in, I think, not Ellen's bedroom, but Susan's bedroom, because I'm going to get into what Susan does here in a second. But why is Susan in a bra? Do you remember that part?
Yeah.
She's like talking to...
I thought it was weird But also, she was changing out of her work clothes. She was hanging up her blouse.
Yeah, but that was just very strange. I think it...
I kept trying to think of why, and I wondered if she was trying to say, this is what a healthy body looks like.
I mean, I think she alludes to that. I can't remember exactly what she's saying, her body, but that it's a juxtaposition against Susan, who's, I mean, like I said, she's getting changed out of her work clothes into, like, more comfy clothes. But we see her in that scene, like, in a bra. Like, most of that talking. And then what does she go do to Ellen? She makes her go into the bathroom, and she has her take off her clothes. She wants to look at her body. And then she weighs her. She takes a picture of Ellen.
A Polaroid.
Yep. And then shows her, like, this is, like, is trying to force her. Again, we talked about the body dysmorphia, but trying to show Ellen, like, don't you see what we see?
She's like, do you really think you're attractive?
Yeah.
And I wanted to smack her quite a bit.
Yep.
But there are times where Susan seems to be the only one fighting for Ellen.
Yeah.
And making sure she gets into Dr. Beckham and pursuing that. He's hard to get into. So she must have really been on them.
I don't want to jump too far ahead in the movie, but you make a good point because Ellen even recognizes that. Mm-hmm. So, toward the end and we'll come back to it when we're talking about Ellen's mom, but like when she's having that conversation with her mom and her mom's wife, her other stepmother, she's saying, like, Susan's pushed me to get the treatment. No one else did.
Yeah. And also, before they go in and have that degrading incident in the bathroom, it's like, okay, Susan, shame isn't going to change her mind.
No.
Or to make her suddenly better, like, oh, you're so right.
But I think a lot of people who have friends or family that are suffering from an eating disorder feel like that is a way to change behavior.
Well, I used to say, I was in a weight loss program where you had to go and get weighed in and go to a meeting and blah, blah, blah. And my joke was always, I have to go get weighed in public. I won't lose weight if I'm not shamed publicly. Susan just kills me. But also, Susan says to Ellen before that, Jack is so mad at you. He can't deal with you. It's because he cares too much. That's the problem.
Right.
That was the quote. And I'm thinking, I've heard that before. The reason the men are angry is because they care too much, which to me sounds like something an abusive spouse or partner would say.
Yeah.
Like, I just love you and care about you so much, it makes me crazy. You're the one making me like this.
I think on some level, Susan is kind of clueless. Like, she's a clueless character.
I don't think she has ever had a mental health struggle or something that was so much out of her control.
Right.
Yeah,
But back to your point about Susan trying, like, I feel like it's genuine, but whether it's her idea or not, like if she's conceptualizing it on her own, we'll get to it and talk about it more, but when Ellen is admitted into the residential treatment in the house, she's getting dropped off by Susan, and Susan, her parting words to her before she leaves, she says, now be good. But then she kind of panics. You see like some panic in her eyes, and she says, but not too good, not perfect. Like, I think she knows enough that, like, she knows that those could be triggering words for Ellen. Because, like, we talked about how there's, like, this connection between anxiety, perfectionism, eating disorders. Like, it's like, it can be, Susan's trying at some point and on some level.
She is, and let's face it, she has been left on her own to deal with a child who is not biologically hers. And she's had to deal with a lot of stuff with Ellen's mom. And this just seems like a very stressful marriage to me. So, and there were certain rules for Ellen being back in the house.
Right.
You know, she had to have her weight taken. She had to have the Polaroid taken. She had to go to the appointment with Dr. Beckham. I've been calling him Beckman, but they call him Dr. Beck in the movie.
Yeah, I think we should just call him Dr. Beck.
Originally, I just called him Dr. Keanu. But I realized maybe that's disrespectful, and I should call him by
his actual character name.
By his character's name. So the appointment leading into this initial intake with Dr. Beck, it's just... Ellen could not get a word in. Get a word in. I actually have in my note, shit show of an intake.
Right.
But in the lobby...
Oh, yeah.
The way the moms talked to each other and just ignored their children.
Yeah.
It was almost like they were talking about their kids in third person.
They were.
And so Ellen takes off to the bathroom and is drinking water, and the other mom that Susan is talking to, her daughter comes in. And apparently, Susan is just telling them Ellen's whole fucking life story.
All her business.
All of it. I hate that. Like, I am a very private person. It's like, if I don't tell somebody something,
Right.
that's because I don't want them to know it. I don't want anyone to go and tell them.
And we talked about last podcast episode about the importance of discussing mental health struggles, disorders. You know, it can help people get better, but it has to be the person who is doing the struggling, like coming and being the initiator of that. But they're just, like you're saying, they're discussing Ellen with one, without her present, and probably two, without her permission.
And it seems as though Susan was making it more than it needed to be. It was a huge situation with this fan who liked her drawing. I mean, I almost thought, oh, it's like the moms are one-upping each other. Like, oh, you think your kid's is bad. Wait until you hear what Ellen did.
Right.
Almost like bragging, too. Like, I've always thought, that not bragging?
Yeah, it's a very distorted way of bragging, because did you catch what the one mom said of the other girl? She says, like, oh, have you guys done Maudsley? Did you catch that?
I did.
It's a type of therapy for anorexia. And it can be pretty intense. I mean, the treatments, you know, you have to go so many times a week for several weeks, and then you kind of get tapered off of that as you get better. It's about looking at information processing that people with anorexia nervosa, and this is specific just for this eating disorder, not for the other ones, but about the rigidity in their thinking and attention to the detail, and to kind of get away from that kind of thinking and look at larger context. It's about bringing forward this understanding that starvation intensifies problems that they're already having. It's not a solution, right? So it's about looking at that differently. It's very intense therapy. It involves using motivational interviewing, some other kind of types of therapy. But yeah, it's an intense kind of outpatient, primarily, therapy. But I kind of feel like that scene is used to like maybe name drop a type of therapy. It's like, it's probably trying to give some familiarity or context to a conversation that these two moms are having.
I also wondered if it was also a very expensive treatment.
That's a good question. I don't know. But I'm sure that if somebody is trained in it, that they could charge what they want. But Dr. Beck supposedly is like this very well-known specialist, and it's very hard to get into. Susan makes a point of like it took months to get Ellen an appointment, and also the girl that is there also, it took her a while to get in, the mom was saying. So like,
it was the idea that it didn't take Ellen as long. She didn't have to, almost like, oh, well, my kid is so bad that she got
pushed
to
the front of the line. But the other thing is too, that kind of brings back to our point we made previous podcast with looking at mental health treatment and what you can afford and what you can't. They're paying probably some high amounts of money for Dr. Beck to treat Ellen.
And to go into a resident, like in that house, it's like, oh, that's money.
It's just interesting because, unfortunately, mental health treatment in our country needs a lot of improvement. I think it's come a good amount of ways from what I know of the past being, but there is still bougie mental health treatment, paying for therapists that are more money, getting certain treatments that cost money that insurance doesn't cover, and you're able to get better treatment if you have the money to pay for it, essentially. So I think that is a theme throughout the movie too.
I have in my notes that Susan has love mixed with a dollop of frustration and fear for Ellen.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
And then I make the point that, this was when I was like, okay, maybe Susan isn't as bad. She set up the appointment, she drove her, but then I make the comment about the other mother, and I'm like, I take everything back I said about Susan having any sort of compassion. The way she blamed everything on Judy and Olive and lesbians was ridiculous. So that, in the intake, with Dr. Beck, Ellen, and Susan took over that entire thing.
She's giving her whole backstory, her whole history. Or she's trying to Dr. Beck, right?
Instead of letting Ellen give her own history. And so the thing is that Ellen's mom was married to her dad, and then she fell in love with her best friend, Olive. And Ellen's mom has a lot of mental health, bipolar.
Yeah, it wasn't definitively... Susan, I think... I didn't think that it was it was identified. Yeah, no, you're right. Bipolar lesbian. That is what Susan said.
Susan. And the way she goes on about Ellen's mom's mental health issues. Like, Judy's mental health issues have been a tragedy for her daughter. A fucking tragedy that has really upended her life. It's just one piece of the puzzle of Ellen and what she's dealing with and how she's dealing with it.
Yeah,
Just Judy's total disregard that might upset Ellen. She tells the story that Ellen called them once because her mom had written her own Bible on the walls of their house.
Yeah.
But my favorite thing is the nonverbal communication between Dr. Beck and Ellen during that. Because he's looking at her like, you can see he's like, oh, that wasn't great.
No.
So
I have a section in my note where I'm trying to pinpoint the little glimpses of a traumatic experience that Ellen had, because trauma is often associated with eating disorders. And so, yes, this description of Susan of her early upbringing where mom is clearly unstable. She's having descriptions of manic episodes, okay? But then also, too, I think either Susan says it or maybe Ellen says it or maybe Judy, who's the mom, says it at some point in the movie, but there's depressive episodes too where she can't stop crying, right? But
and she's had several breakdowns.
Yes. One of my favorite lines in this movie, can we talk about it really quick? Okay. We're going to come back to the end of the movie later on, when we wrap things up. However, Judy and Ellen and Olive, who is her other stepmom, are talking at a point in the movie toward the end where Ellen is defending Susan with Judy and Olive being really negative, and Judy...
Was it the breakdown line?
Yeah, so one of my favorite lines in reference to Judy having these breakdowns is she says, "They were really transformational for me. Everyone should have more breakdowns."
Then Ellen whispered a response.
Well, was it so much of a whisper? Because I think she wanted her mom to hear, because she said, "You didn't feel that way when it happened." Yeah.
But it was really soft.
It was very soft.
But it might have been soft because they're depicting how ill she is.
Yeah.
That she doesn't have a lot of strength. Yeah, and then Dr. Beck goes back and has a physical exam of Ellen.
Yeah, that was in my notes too. And that would be part of the standard procedure of doing an intake. Right. So Ellen, I guess to clear it up for people listening to the podcast, if you haven't watched the movie, or if you're just kind of wondering about these two different experiences that Ellen has. Okay, we see her at the very beginning of the movie. She's leaving an inpatient treatment that's in the hospital. She goes back home. This is the story so far, right, as we're recounting it. She goes back home to her dad and her stepmom, Susan. Susan's trying to get her into the special treatment program with Dr. Beck. Dr. Beck's program is different, in quotations, right? And I know, right? I want to get into that in a second, but Ellen is going to enter inpatient that is actually like residential. So it's more of like a residential. I guess it's considered inpatient because she's getting treatment, but let's refer to it as just residential. But she's going to be entering that program, and so what they would want to do is a basic physical exam. Also, too, here's the other thing I think we should clarify. I'm assuming Dr. Beck is a physician, that he's either MD or a DO. However, he's not, his credentials are not discussed, so I don't know if he's a psychologist or...
Yeah, because he does therapy, and I'm like...
Yeah, he does therapy in the movie, but he also does that physical exam. There's no reason a psychologist, and they're not even trained to do it, they wouldn't do a physical exam.
Is he a psychiatrist?
I think he's got to be a psychiatrist. So he does the physical exam. He is asking her about antidepressants. He's asking her about medication history. He's, kind of saying, do you want to be on anything? And she says, no, they make me gain weight. Like, she's been on antidepressants before. They make her gain weight. He also asked her about menstruation. He asked when her last menstrual cycle was, and then she doesn't say anything. Like she's thinking, and he's like, I bet it was a long time ago. Or I bet it's been a while. Something like that.
Yeah, and he also looked at her back, and her spine had bruises.
Yes.
And he said, you do a lot of sit-ups. And she comes back with, well, no, not really. And goes, it wasn't a question.
Yeah.
Right. That was a statement.
Right. I do like some of Keanu's lines in this movie. And then she is telling him, she's picking up on what he's putting down and basically kind of pinpoint that she's not the healthiest. And she's saying, I don't feel that unhealthy. And then he makes a point of pointing, he points out to her that she feels fuzzy right on her arms. And he tells her that you have excessive hair growth on your arms because your body's trying to keep you warm. He's like, have you ever wondered that? He
said, you've never wondered about the furries or something like that. Mm-hmm. Also, I feel as though the idea of, oh, we have this maverick doctor and he's going to talk to the kids on their level and
That was
swear. And sometimes I'm just like,
So, did you find it cringe?
a little.
I found it a little cringe sometimes too.
Because it's like, I don't know. I don't get it.
The movie reviews I read too also felt that like Keanu's character as Dr. Beck was supposed to be this white knight savior, a man coming to help these women. Although that's not true to a full extent, because when we get to the character of Luke, Luke is a guy who's in treatment with Ellen and he has an eating disorder. It's about this elevation that Keanu as Dr. Beck has as like, again, savior, telling them what to do, is like you were saying, trying to meet them on their level to be cool, to be idolized in a way.
And like he doesn't really care.
Yeah, like he's nonchalant.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's a session with him later on that I'm just like,
yeah, it
what
didn't go very well.
So Ellen is accepted into the program, and of course Susan is elated. So
off she goes to drop her off.
No.
Oh, well.
They have a surprise party. Or I call it Susan's surprise coming out party for Ellen.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Susan is ridiculous, but I'm also thinking Susan was very kind in the way she put it to Ellen.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what if she was? Like, here's this great opening for her to talk about it if she is.
Right.
So then I'm like, well, that's actually a really kind thing to do. And then
you mean I'm assuming you're speaking about Ellen being asked by Susan if she's a lesbian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And telling her it's okay if she is.
Yeah.
But then she says, maybe that's why.
Yeah, Susan's delivery isn't the best, but yeah, her intentions, I think,
I think she was very kind.
Yeah.
And Ellen's response is amazing.
What did she? I don't remember. What did she say?
She said something about, "Are you guys done eating?" And Ellen goes, "Pussy, you mean?"
Oh yeah.
Like,
yes.
God. And it's just, to me, that's such a real moment of, that's exactly what someone would probably say back.
Yeah, well, especially someone who's in their 20s.
Yeah.
And Ellen is trying on some levels to be
offensive
at times, but then also to like ennui or like not caring, like nonchalant, like no big deal, right? Yeah.
The sarcasm for me was my favorite.
Yeah, no, I like the sarcasm bits as well.
But then we get to the ill-conceived cake.
Yes. Oh, so maybe I was wrong earlier when I said it was before, that it was right when she got home. Yeah, okay. So it was after she's been accepted by Dr. Beck. Okay.
My note is, God damn it, Susan, get your shit together.
It was a cool cake. It was in the shape of a hamburger.
And it said,
"Eat up, Ellen."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, but it's also such a typical, like, middle-aged mom thing.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
It's like, read the room, Susan.
Yeah. Susan cannot read the room.
Susan's never read a room.
Ellen gets accepted into this residential treatment facility. It's a house, so it's private. I mean, I'm sure maybe Dr. Beck or whatever company he has owns the house, right? I was wondering if you were going to have a question about this, Carrie. Was this on your list of questions for me about the house and about the treatment, like, setup? Were you wondering about that?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
But only because I figure if you have enough money, you can go to a nice house in a nice, I think, Los Angeles neighborhood is what I'm assuming. And, that's just the world in which they live. And the house is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an older house.
Mm-hmm. It's craftsman.
Yeah, it's got a lot of nice wood features. Yeah.
I mean, really, it was like Realtor.com.
Yeah, right.
But I guess I don't think I've ever seen a home like that. It's not a group home, but a home that nice depicted in anything else for residential treatment. Normally residential, it's like, oh, here's this facility that's locked.
Yes. So there's different levels of residential treatments, like depending on what you're getting treatment for. So we often think residential treatment, it's very common for people who have gone through residential if they're like doing sober living or they're doing recovery from substance use. Mm-hmm. Those are locked units because they don't want people bringing things in or taking things out. They're getting treatment. Ellen is on a locked unit at the beginning of the movie because it's part of a hospital. But yeah, this house that she's going to is not locked. They're free to come and go. There's rules to the house.
There are points to be earned.
Right. One of the prizes or rewards, if you reach a certain amount of points, is that you can go on like trips or do things yourself, right, outside the house. However, nothing is stopping them from leaving.
No, it's just they have agreed that they will follow the rules.
It's like an honor system.
So we, Susan.
Oh, yes.
Dropping.
Who is Susan? Oh,
So Susan is dropping Ellen off at the house.
Yep.
She's brought in by Chloe, and Ellen tells her she doesn't have to carry her suitcase, and Chloe's like, please, it helps me earn points.
When I first saw that, I was like, oh, interesting. I felt like it was weird, and then it gets explained later, but yeah.
We have our tour guide of Luke. Mm-hmm. And give us some background on Luke. What's his life?
We don't get, we get bits and pieces, conversationally.
But what he did for...
So Luke came over from the UK, he explains to Ellen, and he becomes a member of the New Jersey Ballet, which didn't know was a thing. I looked it up, it is a thing.
I wonder if it feeds into New York.
Possibly, yeah. It's just interesting. It's like New Jersey. Creatively, when they're coming up with this screenplay, because the director, we didn't say it before, but the director of the movie is one who came up with a screenplay. It's kind of like her
baby,
her
passion project.
Yeah, right. Her name, Marty Noxon. Creatively, she picked New Jersey. But anywho, so Lucas gets injured, and I'm not clear about this. Carrie, maybe you can clear this up. Does he already have the eating disorder? Or
yeah, and that's why he couldn't
recover,
his knee
right?
Wasn't healing.
Yes.
And it kept snapping or whatever was wrong with it. Yeah, he said that you learn later on when he and Ellen become friends that he had become very thin, which is typical for the ballet, and his body could not heal.
It's just very interesting, and I should have maybe looked up a statistic about how often ballet dancers have an eating disorder.
Well, there's a documentary, it might be Netflix, about anorexic ballerinas.
The prevalence of eating disorders among dancers. It looked at data from 1966 to 2013, and it looks like the overall prevalence of eating disorders amongst dancers was 12%. And specifically for ballet dancers, it was overall 16%.
Well,
had an eating disorder.
Wasn't the average for women, not...
It was 8%. So it's double. It's double.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. So we get to know Luke, and we're looking at these characters, I think, through Ellen's eyes, much like we did Susanna's. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think Luke's character is supposed to be awkward, designed, right? Like that. That's his idea, and Ellen criticizes him, and she's saying like, "Oh, she says to him, "You're so awkward."
What was your first impression of Luke?
He's awkward. He's friendly. To an awkward level, I guess you could say, but that I wouldn't say he's trying to, he comes off as a little bit of a know-it-all, you know what I'm saying? Like, at least at first, like what he's talking about when he's explaining to Ellen the ways of the house, the rules. He brags, we talked a little bit about bragging in other ways, but he's bragging to Ellen about the fact that, like, he has gotten privileges, right? That he's doing so well. I think it comes off as bragging. I think later on in the movie we see discussions of that and about how much progress Luke has made his character and things like that. So maybe it's more positive later in the movie, but yeah, it comes off as bragging to me. What was your first thought?
Listen.
What? Listen what?
Listen. My notes, while I was typing up notes watching the movie, I was cracking myself up and I'm like, that,
Right.
You know how I am. Yeah. So, first impressions of Luke. I'd immediately hate him and imagine creative scenarios in which I slap him about the face. He comes across...
Yeah? Yeah. Give me more.
He comes across as insincere. He's way too happy for my taste.
Yeah, but it's probably a front, right? Like if we overanalyze it. Man, you... Not a fan of Luke, huh?
It's because of some things that happen later.
Yes.
At first... it's just like, we all know people like that. They're like really charming and, they read Raymond Chandler and they're trying to eat at the top 100 restaurants. And
he's like trying to be trendy, right?
Yeah, but but also it could just be that he's trying to fill his time so he doesn't think about food.
But he's thinking about food.
Yeah.
In a way. The other thing is, I think it was a choice to make him British, to make him have an English accent.
And normally, I love
We both love...
I love the Brits. And I love an accent. And his accent is very good. I mean, he is English, so
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, he's not faking that. But
Nope.
Yeah, but I feel like this is all intentional, Carrie. Like, I feel like, I mean, I think maybe kudos to the actor for Alex Sharp, who plays Luke, by making us feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was...
Because I do think it was intentional.
Yeah, and we find out that's one of my red flags later. I have a list, people.
Oh, yeah. We love
Red
lists.
flag number 1. Red flag number 2.
So what we do see, there's some interesting things that we see in the house. I was going to talk about those things.
Yes,
so,
please.
So one of the rules, and Dr. Beck explains it to Ellen even before she gets to the house, but one of the rules is no talking about food. Another rule is that they have to sit at the dinner table even if they don't eat anything. There's no doors on any of the rooms in the house except for the bathroom. The bathroom, it was locked. It could be locked, but yeah, because there's that scene later in the movie where it's locked and then they're trying to break the door down. But they discourage certain things like, excessive exercise.
That's why the doors are off.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then also too, like, one of the rules is that there are certain things that you can get to do if you earn, they call it like levels, or earn
You're in stars,
points.
right?
Yeah, something like that. It's a reward system for good behavior, essentially. So, but we don't, other than Chloe coming to get Ellen's bags, do we see other things that you can earn?
No, I mean, I can imagine things that they probably earned for, like,
I think
besides eating.
Right, you get points for eating. Like, if you...
And you get points for helping others.
Right.
But I bet there are, like, points for participating in group.
Right.
Points for, maintaining or gaining.
Right.
That's what I would think. So, anything else from the house that we need to discuss? Luke is the only boy.
Right, and I think the other girls share rooms. They have roommates. Oh no, Luke. So the people who have their own room is Luke and then Megan, because she's pregnant.
Right.
So all the other girls though share rooms, share their spaces. So I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything I necessarily want to talk about the house or like that setup. Yeah.
Well, I would love to talk about Lobo. When they get up to Ellen's bedroom, Lobo has to go through all of her stuff.
Oh yeah, the standard procedure.
Yeah. And, Ellen's like, why? And she's like, well, this pill bottle, it says it's aspirin, but how do we know?
Right.
Just things like that. And she's not allowed to have her iPad.
Right.
Which isn't connected to the internet.
Right.
She uses it to draw. So they said, no, we want you to use pen and paper at first. And then Susan thinks that Lobo doesn't know what's up. And she's like trying to tell her, oh, well, you don't know all of her tricks. And Lobo's going, no, I know all the tricks.
Yeah.
But you want to know what's stuck in my craw?
What's in your craw, Carrie?
Well,
tell me about your craw.
When Lobo asks Ellen if she cuts herself,
yeah,
Ellen's response is, I'm not that on trend.
Yeah, I had that marked down too.
And I just...
Did that irk you?
It did irk me.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it's dismissive of people who do.
It is. Well, before we get back to that...
Okay.
No, but
Ellen I feel myself.
No, but Ellen is dismissive.
She is.
She's not... Okay, so she's mocking the girl at the very beginning, opening scene. They're in that group therapy. She is saying that, well, I mean, it kind of comes from her sister Kelly, but there's like that calorie Asperger's, so they're essentially joking about someone who has Asperger's or has autism, saying that, like, she's some kind of...
And when they're, in the beginning, she and her sister go out.
Yes.
And she's the R word.
The hard R. Dude, I have that in my notes. I said they both dropped a hard R.
But for what word? It's not...
Yeah.
It's the R word.
Yes. R word, yes. I don't really... I feel like enough people know what we're talking about. We don't have to say it out loud.
But it's a disparaging term for someone who might have... Intellectual disabilities.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was weird because when I was growing up, in the dark times of the 80s,
yeah,
That word was used all the time.
It was used in the 90s when I was growing up too. But
and so I guess I was surprised by my reaction to her using it.
in 2017?
Yeah, because I heard her say, and I'm like, what did you just say, young lady?
I had a thought. I was like, was it acceptable still back then? Like, I mean, that was 8 years ago, but
Maybe it just depends on your group of friends and what you all will accept or not accept.
yeah, I wonder if it was, I wonder again if it's an intentional thing that was part of the screenplay, was part of the vision for the movie, because Ellen is not likable.
No.
No, as a character. I mean, she
gets there.
Gets there, she improves, but as overall, I think throughout the movie, she's not super likable. She causes problems in the house. So, can we skip maybe to like the first group therapy session?
Yes.
Okay. So,
that was all I had to say about that.
okay. Yeah, Ellen is dismissive of other things in the movie. We see that.
Yeah, and I really do like, not to keep going back to Girl Interrupted, but that once Ellen gets into the house, they all talk this shorthand
Right.
about the disease, and they're all very open. Whereas, and they don't get upset
Yeah.
about, well, until our first group meeting.
Right.
But I just thought that was an interesting throwback.
Yeah, there's a lexicon that comes along with being in a community of people that, share certain things. So yeah, they're discussing things like calling each other Rexy, or I forget some of the other words that they use, but they're using terms that someone with an eating disorder could commonly use with other people. But yeah, I mean, in that first group session, they're all talking, and Ellen, you can tell Ellen, she's been through other groups. She's just like not fazed by this. She you can tell she doesn't really want to participate. And then Ellen really sabotages Pearl. Yeah, because Pearl has gotten a feeding tube.
One of her roommates.
Yeah, one of her roommates has gotten a feeding tube. And I think, it's weird. Like, Ellen's a little passive aggressive, right? Because, what she does is, she tries to comfort Pearl by saying, oh, I've had one before. Trying to make it not a big deal. However, when they're in this group session and they're doing a check-in with the therapist, and Pearl is talking about these tube feeds, how she thinks it's ugly, but, she doesn't know how many calories it's going to be. And then Ellen quickly quips, 1,500 calories.
At first I thought, I wrote that, she didn't know that she wasn't allowed. But I'm like, she has been in enough groups.
She knows better.
To know that you do not.
So it's coming off as
because they don't talk numbers. And that's the only time we hear a number in this movie.
Absolutely. Yep. We hear a couple of numbers when we're talking about Ellen's weight. But that's, and that's sprinkled throughout. But yeah, you're right. In terms of food, that's the only time. And the Kelly and Ellen discussion about the calories and things like that. But Ellen, you're right. Ellen knows enough that she can stop herself. She knows it would be triggering. So I wonder if it comes off as she's kind of a know-it-all, knowing how much a tube feed was. It's, again, kind of indicating the severity of her disorder. And then the other thing is too, we talk about, when we did with Girl Interrupted, we talked about creating chaos. Ellen created chaos briefly by bringing that up. But it got shut down. It quickly got shut down. So
she doesn't get any sympathy from me on this. I can't do it.
Right.
Even though I would have loved to. And and then I remembered this isn't her first time at the radio.
No, there's lots of comparing in that part of the movie, and then subsequently other scenes about comparing them or in patients, how...
Yeah.
how many
well,
people
even talking about the tube, when Pearl, when she first meets her, she's in bed. She had just gotten the tube. And so Ellen makes a comment that a girl at her last rehab had to get a stomach tube.
Yeah.
Because she wouldn't chew. And Pearl's response to that is, ew, I chew, I just don't swallow. But that's the kind, I guess that goes back to the shorthand, it's interesting to see the judgment. It's
but amongst them and one another.
It's girl.
Yeah, I would never.
It's I would never.
The other thing that Pearl says that she would never do is have a baby. Yeah, and Pearl's character is very juvenile. We
very
don't
into ponies.
I know, but we don't know her age. But she seems like she's not that much younger than Ellen, who's 20. So Pearl's character is very childlike. It's just interesting when the comment of she would never have a baby. And she's saying that because one of the housemates, Megan, is pregnant. And I know that she's probably saying that because she's, and probably imagining in her head, like, getting larger because of having a baby. She's not even considering, like, in that moment about herself, any positives of, like, wanting to be a mother. It's all negative, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so, again, very maybe childlike, because I don't, again, her frame of mind, like, where she is emotionally and developmentally, she's not maybe considering being a mom.
It makes you wonder what trauma she had gone through that she... I mean, and when I say she likes ponies,
Yeah.
her little alcove in their room is covered. Every type of pony.
And Ellen kind of has a quick remark about that, too. Like, she's a little snarky when it comes to that.
Well, and then
Yeah.
just one more thing about the first dinner.
Yeah.
After the group meeting is Pearl's reaction to Luke enjoying his dinner because she had just learned about the 1,500 calories.
Yeah.
And she runs from the table, but you see that they love this group of people. They do love each other and want to make sure everyone's okay and they take care of each other because Luke goes right over.
Yeah, to support her. And
and you hear him like whispering to her about ponies and things. It's very childlike, but
yeah, and maybe a positive on Luke's side is that he's trying to be helpful. He's trying to be comforting. I don't think that there's any ulterior motives for doing that. However, if we can jump maybe to talking about Luke and Ellen and the candy wrapper kind of situation, the candy.
Listen, that made me uncomfortable.
Is that another one of your red flags?
It is.
Okay.
Because he's trying... Well, my first red flag, can we do that real... Because it was...
do the first one, and then we'll go to that one.
The first red flag was she comes into his room on the first or second night to talk to him, and she sees pictures of him as a dancer.
You're talking about Ellen.
Ellen, yes. And Ellen... I need to make sure I'm saying who the characters are when I talk.
Right.
So Ellen comes in, and one of her drawings from her Tumblr page that she had to take down the page because of this girl who was following her on Tumblr. And he's like, yeah, I've had that. I heard about you first 2 years ago. That's why I was so awkward. I was just trying too hard when you got here. I was just trying to be interesting.
Yeah, I remember.
And I'm thinking to myself, that is...
creepy?
Yeah, because he doesn't tell her. He's trying... So he knows things about her.
Yes.
That she doesn't realize.
Right.
And he's hiding that from her, and it seems manipulative. Because he has ways now that he thinks he can get close to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he's a fan.
Yeah, Ellen and all her fans. Yeah. So I didn't remember. That came off to me as creepy. In someone's mind, you could imagine that maybe under different circumstances, if Luke maybe wasn't trying to withhold information in order to, like you were saying, manipulate Ellen, he would say to her when she first walked in, oh, yeah, I know who you are. Mm-hmm. Right? But he, like he said, and like you're kind of pointing out, he doesn't say anything. That's why he's awkward. Like, I don't,
He was just trying... I think
it seems like a front.
He was just trying way too hard to impress her.
Right. Yes. So then another after that, Ellen's not eating, right? So then there's this whole scene there in the living room. They're watching TV as a group, and
she had told Luke that she draws food when she can't sleep, and what she misses most are goo-goo clusters.
Right, and so he purposely got one, and that scene is very cringeworthy. Like, because what Luke is doing is he's sexualizing the food, like, to get a response out of Ellen, which, I mean, maybe he's being awkward on purpose because then you're not ignoring him, like, but all the whole group, like, knows what he's doing, like, he's making it sexual.
And they're even, it might have been Grace is another girl in the group, and she's like, ew.
Yeah.
Like, everyone was just like...
Yeah. and where, he's wanting to watch her eat. So, like, what I put down in my notes was, like, Luke must have a fetish of watching other people eat. You know that there's, like, a fetish where you can...
Feeders. Mm-hmm.
I wonder how you know that?
I watch my 600-pound life.
There we go. I
And
wonder if any of those people make money off of doing that.
yes.
Oh, really?
There was one woman who, she got so sick before she got better.
Yeah.
But that's how she made a living, was she had an OnlyFans or a YouTube account, something. Mm-hmm. And men would get in touch with her and say what they wanted to watch her eat.
Yeah.
So she would get it. And that's how she made money.
Right.
Because she couldn't get out of her house.
Yeah.
I mean, not that there's anything wrong with having an OnlyFans or whatever, but if that's what you have to do because you can't leave your house, it's just so... And also, these freaking people who are paying her money knowing that she is unhealthy.
And they're contributing to her.
Yeah. And they're enjoying it.
Yeah, there's mutual destruction somewhat in that kind of stuff. But yeah. And then Ellen huffs the candy. Oh, no. Yeah, Ellen takes a sniff, but they all take it.
They all do.
They
They're
pass
all
it
like,
around. That was just
well,
classic.
and I thought to myself, I'm like, listen.
Who hasn't huffed a candy wrapper?
Exactly. Like,
is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, because, like, I'm thinking, like, in high school, sleepovers, whatever. You know, most of the girls were like, oh, no, I can't.
Yeah.
But then you get one person who eats it and everyone else
Smell this.
is huffing on that.
Yeah. How often have we said that to one another? Smell this.
Yeah. So, Dr. Beck, and I thought this was strange, he just came in and told Ellen while she was drawing in her room, hey, family therapy tomorrow.
Right.
Would you spring it on someone the night before? Wouldn't you want to prepare your client?
There's some strategy in not doing stuff like that, so as to
I don't like it.
Well, I know. You could do it to prevent someone from sabotaging it. There's ways to maybe do it to... there's lots of...
Well, I guess it might cut down on anxiety for the client.
Yes, it can cut down anxiety. There's also probably a spike in her anxiety that she was told last minute, right? Because people with anxiety, we don't know... Other than the eating disorder, we don't actually know what else Ellen might have, but let's say she did have anxiety. She could have a spike in anxiety just by overthinking about how it's going to go. And people with anxiety often like to have enough time to overthink things, right?
And gird their loins.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
is, I am a person who thinks I need enough time to prepare myself.
Yeah, what did you think about the family session? Now, this is the one, this is in Dr. Beck's office that's outside of the house. Ellen leaves the house and goes and meets her.
So the people in attendance are Susan, Kelly, Judy, who is Ellen's mom, and Ellen's other stepmom, Olive, Dr. Beck, and no dad.
Yep.
And then, it's just Susan going after Judy and Olive, or Judy mostly, about their sex life with this man.
Yeah. So Susan and Judy, like all of the women besides Ellen and her sister Kelly, because Kelly speaks about herself. We'll get that to in a minute, but the other women make it their therapy session, right? So like the way that Dr. Beck prefaces this therapy session with Ellen's family and kind of presents it to her, it's something that could be helpful. And he says that, and she asks, like, are we going to keep doing this, right? Like, is it going to be one or whatever? And he says, if it's productive, if it's helpful, right?
Well, guess what?
It wouldn't. I almost feel like I bet his character, if he's seen enough or done enough of these family therapy sessions, I'm sure he's seen them gone off the rails. But that's basically what happens. Like, he tries to bring it back, right? After, Ellen is going off or not Ellen is going off. I'm sorry, Susan. After Susan goes off on, like you were saying, Judy, and she brings it up again, abandoning Ellen, dropping her off at their house, marrying your best friend.
Yeah, and Susan makes the comment that Jack left Judy because they weren't having sex.
Right.
No, Judy says they weren't having sex anymore.
Yeah.
And then Susan says, well, he doesn't have any problem with me. 2 nights a week like clockwork.
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you saying all of this shit in front of your kids? Why would your sex life, not to mention, it has nothing to do with Ellen.
Yeah. Not that we have to keep beating the dead horse, but boundaries is a, lacking
I'm telling you,
kind of
I've
aspect.
never met one.
But yeah, Susan, I don't know. Susan is one. Okay, this is where I kind of was maybe alluding to when Susan's clueless. Like, she doesn't understand boundaries. Like, boundaries in the bathroom, taking pictures of Ellen, talking about her body, things like that. Obviously, in a therapy session, no boundaries. Not that Judy, Ellen's mom, is much better. But Dr. Beck tries to bring it back, right? Tries to get some order in and ask Kelly what she thinks about all of this. And Kelly really lets her feelings out. Like, I wonder if she was just waiting for an opportunity to be like,
Asked.
yeah, like how she feels about her sister.
Is that before or after Ellen says, I'm sorry, I'm not a person anymore, I'm a problem?
It is, it's kind of, it's intermixed. So
Okay.
Kelly starts to talk about how she makes it feel, and I guess there's like a pause, and then I have it in my notes about Ellen saying what you said, I'm sorry, I'm not a person, I'm a problem.
Yeah, and Beck had asked her, well, he's trying to check in with her, and he's like, and she looks horrible. And just like sickly. And he said, how are you, what are your thoughts on this? And that's when she says it. But Kelly is the only one who it wasn't about, it was Kelly's issues with it.
Right.
But it wasn't about anything negative about Ellen, really.
Just one line.
It was more, I can't look at pictures. I can't look at pictures of my prom because when I see those, I think, oh my God, Ellen almost died. She was in the hospital.
Yeah, I made a note about how Kelly's memories and her perception of her past is tied very closely to these events with Ellen. And it's just it's a very interesting way to remember things. But I know people who experience trauma, and and for Kelly, these are traumatic things, especially if you are worried your sister's going to die. Like, these are, the way she looks at her life is through the lens of Ellen's, on some levels, not all the time, but is through Ellen's sickness, her disorder. And the only negative thing that Kelly does bring up about Ellen, to your point when you were saying like she's mostly positive, and she is, Kelly says, all my friends think she is a freak who killed a girl. Now, I think that Kelly brings that up not to make Ellen feel guilty, which is what I wanted to kind of segue into here in a minute, but she's bringing it up because I think Kelly is sad that that's how other people perceive Ellen. Like, that, she knows her sister is more than that, but that, in a nutshell, is how other people look at her, and she's using her friends as the example.
And that would be really hard.
Yeah.
To live with that.
Yeah.
Well, and then that goes into Judy.
Yeah.
Judy. She starts talking about how Jack doesn't, he's never known who Ellen was. And that she should have been, like, Susan made her take her Tumblr page down. And Susan's like, no, she did that herself. And and Judy's like, oh, they want her to go to college and be an attorney or go into business. Something like that.
Right.
And when Judy says he doesn't even know her, I'm like, well, neither do you. You were so sick through her childhood that you don't know her. You don't know what is going on with her. Probably the person who knows best, or the people, are Kelly and Susan who know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my understanding that they were probably there with her through the worst of it.
So I wanted to reach in and just give her a talking to. It's like, you don't know her.
Yeah. There's a lot of finger pointing going on.
Yeah. And I think the artist part, because her mom is very nature oriented, very more arts.
Earthy. We could say crunchy.
Yeah. I've never used that term. Is that what the kids are saying?
The kids say that people who are like more into like homeopathic remedies and are into like experiencing nature and getting in tune with one's spirituality, like, crunchiness, whatever.
Oh, I am not crunchy. I'm soggy. I like staying in the house.
You could say that Judy's like a modern day hippie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a point of pride for her if Ellen were an artist who is successful, and she could also say to Jack, well, screw you, because she's an artist and
Right.
she's really good at it.
Yeah. I think one out of that moment in the movie where they're having the family session, I think you can see the body language of Ellen as they're talking. You know, she's I mean, she's small already, but she's shrinking, right? She's shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. I think that there's moments throughout the movie, and that's one particular one where we can really see that Ellen feels extreme amounts of guilt. So we see throughout the movie they're talking about when it eventually kind of comes to light about these drawings on Tumblr, and Ellen has said numerous times like she didn't intend for anything to happen, right? Like it was her drawing through how she looks at herself, how she looks at the world, right?
Which is what her teachers had told her to
Right.
do.
Yes. Yeah. And so she felt like, but she did feel a sense of responsibility for it. Because during that therapy session, Dr. Beck is he's trying to bring some order to the scene. Judy and Susan are both going off. Judy is the one who is bringing up her artwork and brings up the girl that died and things like that. And Dr. Beck says that nobody died because of Ellen's artwork. So because he's trying to displace any guilt or responsibility from Ellen on what this girl decided to do, right? Because he knows her story, right? It's probably, we don't see Ellen tell him. We see Ellen tell other people throughout the movie about what happened, but I'm sure as part of his due diligence in treating Ellen, he got all that information. But, he's saying that, and then Ellen's response is, I just don't get the point. Like I think she is saying she doesn't get the point of saying that, because, in her mind, this girl did die as a result of her artwork. Not skipping too far ahead, but at another therapy session where Dr. Beck and Ellen are one-on-one, they're talking about Ellen not having any progress in this treatment, and Dr. Beck is onto what she's doing and is noting that she's not doing much progress, and Ellen is being defensive, and Dr. Beck, I keep saying, just calling him Beck, but Dr. Beck says to her that there's a way to be safe, but it's childish and cowardly. It stops you from experiencing anything good. He's talking about what she's doing. And she says to him, you don't think I feel bad enough already? I know I messed up and you're supposed to teach me how not to be. And then, you had mentioned earlier about Keanu's character about maybe being a little condescending somewhat, because then he says to her, stop waiting for life to be easy. Stop waiting for someone to save you. What he's doing, I wanted to discuss real quick is...
Are you looking at my face right now?
I know you have a look on your face like, Jesus, come on. But what I wanted to maybe give him the benefit of the doubt is I think he's doing a technique in therapy called confrontation. So when...
I hate confrontation.
In general?
In general, yes. I do not like it.
So...
I'm mean, but just to no one but myself, apparently.
Right, you're just mean to yourself. But in therapy... when someone is not understanding a point and is having maybe self-destructive behaviors and is not having any insight into that, I often have to do it during appointments too, to confront people on, you're saying and doing one thing, but then, the other thing is we have this goal of maybe achieving something, and there's just there's a disconnect, right? So the confrontation is to kind of maybe make a connection between those things. And I think that's what he's doing, but it does come off as condescending. There's an unnecessary switch that gets flipped where he's the cool guy. He's understanding of them. You can tell me what you want. I'm different than those other doctors. I'm not going to treat you like a child and stuff. And
I'm different from those other boys.
I know, right? And then in that therapy session with Ellen later in the movie, it gets switched.
Yeah, and do we quickly want to talk about Megan and her story?
Yeah, we can.
Just quickly.
Yeah.
Megan said she didn't want to talk about the baby or have a baby shower or say the name until she was 12 weeks along, because her getting pregnant was, they call her the unicorn, because she got her period once, had a one-night stand, got pregnant, which, when you have anorexia, you stop having your period, so harder, that's not something that happens. And so she tells them that the baby's name is Cassidy, and that the day before had been 12 weeks, and so they could have the shower. So they have it. Everyone was happy. You know, it was very joyful.
Yeah.
And then Ellen and Luke, yet another red flag, go out into the garden. And he holds her hand, and she seems fine with that.
Right.
And then he asks her if she had been bad touched. Is that what he said?
What he said was, did somebody bad touch you as a kid or something? It's a big Rexy thing. If anybody's not understanding what he's saying, is there is a connection to childhood abuse, in particular sexual abuse, because I did a project on this when I was in college for my psychology class. I looked at research that looked at those in eating disorders. But yeah, Luke is not incorrect in saying that there's a big connection between specifically anorexia and childhood sexual abuse. So he's asking her about that.
In the most ridiculous way possible.
Yeah.
But, and then he asks her if she's ever had sex.
Right. Yeah.
And he said, was it horrible or too horrible to think about?
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing she's a virgin because she says, too horrible to think about. I took that as her saying, no, I've never had sex because it's just too horrible to think of.
I took that to meaning that she probably was abused. Because it either right before that line or right after that. No, it had to be before. When Luke had asked her, like, about if she'd been touched or anything, Ellen said, just normal shit. And then she gave examples of her breast. She got her breast grabbed. She was rubbed up on a bus, dirty talk, light stalking. She makes she's trying to make it nonchalant as someone minimizes, something that's traumatic. And then she says what you're talking about. So I think it was kind of like an escalation of things. I took it to mean that somebody did, take advantage of her.
I would love to pick the brain of the writer.
Yeah.
And say, so what are you saying here?
Right. But did you catch Luke's line after that? When he's talking about women in general, he's talking about Ellen and women, and he says, it's like you're all a bunch of portable holes for men to fuck. I was like, whoa, buddy.
And he said it as a joke.
Yeah, he's joking.
But it was awfully specific.
Yes.
And when Ellen was talking about, like, just your normal touching, I will say, as a teenager, like, guys I was friends with, like, I'm like, oh my God. I was in a car with some friends and we were going somewhere and we were at a stoplight. So I had turned around. I was in the passenger seat to talk to the people in the back seat. And one of the guys just reached out in the dark and grabbed me.
Yeah.
And I quickly turned around and said that, but it was weird. I'm just like, first of all, if I have children, that's what's going to feed them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I don't get why you're so excited to touch a mammary gland.
Yeah, break it down to, like, anatomy and see how people feel about it.
Being a girl is terrifying at that once you hit puberty.
Yeah. I think growing up is awkward, and as people's bodies change, hormones rage. Those aren't excuses for any kind of bad behavior, but I mean, I think that's when some of this happens, and then it's important that kids learn that that's, like, not good, right?
And that it's not just a normal thing that happens to everybody.
Right. No, I had someone the other day tell me that when they're talking about their traumatic history, how they were growing up, this person told me that they didn't talk about it when they were young, but then, like, as they're an adult and they were telling people their history, she felt like it was, like, normal, and people were like, no, this is not normal that happened to you. And she's like, oh, no, everyone didn't have this when they were growing up. But yeah, I mean, Luke tries to get Ellen, after all of these things he said, want to be interested in, like, taking their friendship a step further. And he says to her it's either before or while he's, like, suddenly kissing her and, like, all over her, he says, you need to be touched by someone who actually cares about you. That's all well and good. Like, if he had said that...
But she didn't ask.
She didn't ask. I'm saying that is all true that he said, but the lead up to that, it's red flag. It's like, yeah.
And so then he kisses her.
Yeah.
And then he just crawls on top of her, lays her down. So they get up.
Another red flag, though, is when she rejects him, right? She's, like, saying, whoa, like, what is happening? What is going on? He immediately becomes sarcastic and says, yeah, I wouldn't want it either. It would be like slapping 2 bags of bones anyway.
Boys.
Right.
Or just humans, I guess. But then she goes, I've only known you, we just met, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, I think I'm in love with you.
Yeah.
And she's like, we've only known each other 3 weeks, and he comes back with, I've loved you for 2 years.
Right.
Since he had discovered her on Tumblr.
Right.
And I'm just like, can we report this to someone?
Right. It wasn't just admiration in that earlier scene where he was like, oh, yeah, I knew of you, liked your artwork. This is no. I mean, obsession,
Talk
maybe.
about a stalker. Like,
Absolutely.
it made me wonder, well, how much did he follow her? How did he look her up?
Right.
When he got out there, like address and...
Well, and Ellen asked him, like, why now? Why is he doing this? And his line after that, his response was, I thought if you knew I wanted to be good and different. Yeah, that she would be maybe okay with taking whatever they had further. You know, that's his reasoning. That echoes a lot of what I've heard from other people saying that their partners, if they felt uncomfortable doing something and their partners were trying to reason with them, it was like, oh, but I'm better than these other people that have treated you poorly. I'm going to treat you better than them. Like, and yet you're still making me uncomfortable and still...
So then Ellen tells him exactly what happened with her fan, that the fan had thought so much, wanted to be like her, that she killed herself. And when she did, her parents sent Ellen the pictures of her body.
Yeah.
Which, my God.
I wonder, okay, if we're just briefly, if we're going to talk about the parents of the girl who died by suicide, I wonder if they didn't know that Ellen was maybe a child as well. Maybe they thought that she was like an adult, but still, it doesn't justify sending pictures of your dead daughter to the person who you think maybe contributed to her death.
And really, how did she contribute other than this girl, this fan, recognized something in Ellen that was also in her? But that doesn't mean...
When that part of the story doesn't make sense to me, other than I feel like it is a way to explain how Ellen knew that her fan died because of her. Because who's Gen Z and younger listening to this podcast, Tumblr is a website that is like a blog and you put stuff up on it. And so there's no way to know for sure. How else would have Ellen known that she caused somebody's death if the parents didn't make her aware? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like that's just part of the story about moving the storyline forward about Ellen.
And just kind of regarding that, had said a couple of times, it's not just one thing. Like, Susan's trying to blame it on one thing here. No, okay, well then it's Judy and Olive. And, and it's, Dr. Beck says, it's not one thing. It's a bunch of shit. He didn't say this, but, it's a bunch of shitty things that have caused the perfect storm.
Right.
And there's not just one thing.
Right.
So there's no reason for anyone to feel guilty.
Yeah. I mean, coming back to that big theme of guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, okay, what we were kind of leading up to is with Megan and her unicorn status is that, trigger warning for anybody who's about to, like, go on with the podcast, but Megan ends up losing the baby. There's this scene.
The night.
Yes, when all this is going on, and this is, Ellen is the one that discovers her after we see her out of control with what happened with Luke in this revelation in his admission, and she's in her bed exercising, right? She's doing all of those rapid sit-ups and things like that, but she finds Megan in the bathroom after Lobo tries to break down the door because it's locked. It's not super graphic, but it's graphic
brief
enough to be...
Yeah. You know what happened.
Yeah, you know what happened. And I think, we don't really hear from Megan about it because the people in the house are talking about Megan after she has left, after she goes to the hospital because she's having the miscarriage. They are talking about maybe Megan doing something to have lost her baby, and Dr. Beck shuts that down immediately,
Was it Ellen who said she didn't want that baby, or she was never going to have that baby, or...
Yeah, Ellen said something to the fact that baby was never going to make it.
Oh, and by the way, by this point, she changed her name to Eli.
Yeah.
So, by the way...
Yeah, we should refer to her as Eli. But I mean, nothing against anybody changing their name, but the thing is, okay, so it was suggested by the therapist to change her name to maybe give her some kind of a new identity, but...
I was going to ask you why a therapist would...
I'm assuming that's what it is. I forget what Ellen says that prompts the therapist during that one, they were having a group session that the therapist is like, well, you could go by Eli. But it's about maybe Ellen coming up with a new identity, a new sense of self by calling herself Eli. Ellen has all this baggage that she doesn't deal with. She's dealing with it in an unhealthy way with her eating disorder. And that's the control that she wants, is she's controlling her eating. She can't control these other things in her life. And the therapist's suggestion in that moment is like, well, let's just change your thing.
He says to her, I don't like your name. That's how he says it. And
Who said that?
Beck.
That's right, yeah.
Because it was a one-on-one session. It was like her first one.
Yeah.
It was after the family therapy. So, and of course, because I'm a poet, I have to mention that Beck brought in, after Megan had lost the baby the next morning and told everyone that she wasn't coming back. She didn't want to come back. He had Chloe read the poem Courage by Anne Sexton.
Yeah.
Which they don't read all of it.
Yeah, I thought they only read a part of it.
Yeah. So, anyone should look that up and read it. I was going to read a part of it here, and I'm like, no.
On this podcast, we're big fans of poetry. So, I mean, there's Anne Sexton's Courage, and then also, too, our podcast is named after an Emily Dickinson poem. I think it's just fitting, Carrie, we have to make a mention of that it comes out in the movie. But.
Yeah, and it's about the 4 stages of life. So, they leave off the part about death.
Yeah.
Which was my favorite part.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of, like, if we're talking about other themes, there's a lot of life and death themes. So, like, when Dr. Beck takes the group on a group field trip to the art exhibition where it's just raining.
Okay, were they actually getting rained on?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, why are they doing this?
I didn't know what to think about that scene. I get it's a way as part of the story to, again, move things along, kind of show progress, show that they're bonding as a group, show like what they could be doing as part of the treatment plan. Like, I get all of the reasons for why that's included as part of the storyline, but like
the conversation after, though, that she has with Beck, I'm just like, that was useless. But I don't know why.
But I don't.
Except Pearl yelling "fuck" was my favorite part.
I know, I love it. Yeah,
it's like this little squeaky fuck.
There's also my favorite part of that. So that I really enjoyed that part with Pearl. My other favorite part, right before they go into the art exhibit where it's raining, they're meeting up and Dr. Beck meets the group, and Kendra says, "Damn, Dr. Beck, you trying to turn me straight?" And he's like, and then his response was like, "No, that's another program." Like that.
Yeah, that was funny.
I loved
I also liked when they were being told by Karen, the other therapist who comes for the group therapy at night, that they were going on a field trip. Megan says, my mom, it's not the Holocaust Museum, is it? And they're all like, oh my God. She goes, my mom took me once.
That was a good scene.
To show me, to encourage me not to starve myself. And everyone just looked like, oh my God. And she's like, it's okay, we're Jewish. And I'm like, but that triggers like thoughts of things that people tell you throughout your life about your weight to try to get you to.
Right.
I'm just like, ugh.
I mean, it's like Susan showing Ellen the Polaroid.
Yeah.
Like be confronted with these images. Yeah. But the difference is the Holocaust Museum is people who were actually starved to death. So it's like,
I mean, it's just so outlandish and outrageous that you would do that to your own child.
Yeah, it's that understanding that you're doing this to yourself. Snap out of it. We got that.
They didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
It just, to me, it sounds like you're selfish.
Yeah.
You just, you don't know what real pain and terror is. Okay, so Ellen starts to go downhill pretty rapidly after Megan loses the baby. And she decides, after a very contentious and confrontational appointment with Dr. Beck, what kind of therapist would say to a client, life has no point and you're just going to have to get used to it. There's no point for us being, and I am like, listen, I deal with a lot of existential angst.
Yeah.
Like, why, like, this all seems to mean nothing. And if you get too far down into that rabbit hole, it's debilitating sometimes and can be really depressing. And I'm thinking, sir, I don't think you're actually a therapist or psychiatrist of any kind.
He's a fraudster.
It was very strange to me.
I think there's a time and a place to have that conversation with somebody, not when they're declining, not when
And
they're
about to be put on a feeding tube.
Yes, which is what Ellen was at that point, because she was not eating and she was losing weight. And yeah, that was not the time and place to even bring that up. I have had similar conversations with people, like theoretically, what's the point of this, and what is life about, like, but I'm talking to people that are in stable moments of their life. They're able to have those conversations and not spiral. Mm-hmm. But that was not the time to discuss that with Ellen. Because what does she do? She leaves that appointment and she goes and packs her shit and she leaves.
And she runs into Luke on the stairs coming back from his knee appointment to see when he would be able to dance again. Mm-hmm. But he is on crutches. I almost said he was on stitches, but no. He was on crutches.
Yep.
And she's leaving and he's like, "What do you mean? You can't leave me." "Sir, yes I can." And he said, you had the quote written down.
What he said was, "I'm done doing the one thing that makes me feel you're my next thing."
Wow, how romantic, Luke.
Yeah, so he's saying to Ellen that she makes him feel just like ballet did. That's putting a lot of pressure on Ellen for someone that she's barely known, even though he's known her, right, as we learn, for much longer. And
it's like, Luke, you could not make this any worse than what you've already done.
No, someone who deals with so much guilt, it's like he's putting it on her.
Yeah.
Like, and with her leaving, he's not going to have his next thing. Again, red flags for Luke.
Almost like he's addicted to being around her.
Yep.
Yeah, just the thought that she's going to save him somehow.
Right.
It's like, no, you're going to have to deal with the fact that you're no longer going to be a professional dancer. So her being here isn't going to make you feel any better about that.
No.
It was just, it was wild. So anyway, Ellen leaves. Good for her. Kind of.
Yeah, but where's she going to go, right? Like,
Well, she goes and faints at a bus station.
Yeah,
and
nice.
Then, and then she goes to Arizona to see her mom and Olive.
It's interesting that she went there. I don't know what was going through her mind. We don't know, but maybe because she wanted to not have to go back to Susan's house and her dad's house and be a failure.
Well, I don't know if they would even let her back in.
Yeah, that's true. But then Susan comes looking for her. I think that's after Dr. Beck calls her saying that, Ellen has taken off. But they come looking for her and she's like, "What kind of facility is this where people can just walk off?"
It's like, they're not prisoners.
Yeah, that's what that's what he says to an extent. Yeah. The scenes with Ellen at Judy and Olive's place in Arizona.
Yes.
Very interesting.
At dinner, we find out that Dr. Beck had called to tell them, "Hey, keep an eye out. She might be heading your way," and that he was worried about her. And Ellen lit up. Somebody's actually worried about me, not how my behavior is affecting them. And they start talking down about Dr. Beck.
Yeah, that's all they have to say about him. I wrote down what they said. So I'm not sure who's saying what line, but Judy and Olive are pretty much talking right in step with one another. And one of them says, "I knew it wasn't going to work out with that doctor." Then the next one says, he has such an attitude. Then the next one, I think it was Judy, said, "Oh, God complex." And then I think then it was Olive saying, "Oh, he was so dismissive." And then Judy saying, "And with Susan, he really let her attack us," making it about them.
Yeah.
And then Ellen is saying he just wanted everyone to be honest for her appointment. And then Judy goes into that whole thing about her transformational breakdowns. And I loved that Ellen is asked by her mom if she wants to work with Olive and Freya, who's a horse. And Ellen kind of is put off by that. Really?
Well, they do that a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but don't they take people in rehab to help them
equestrian
trust?
Therapy?
Yes,
it is. Equestrian therapy is a thing, but it's funny because the person who's doing the therapy is the horse, Freya, and is the one doing something, and Olive is I'm a conduit. And she's like, yeah, she's a conduit for Freya, the horse. Like, it's just, I
She
love it.
neighs and everything.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was weird.
Mm-hmm.
It was really weird. And then where do they put her?
Yeah.
They put her in a yurt.
A yurt. I liked the yurt.
I did,
But it wasn't
but-
in the house.
No, it was outside in the
Yeah.
backyard in the desert, and all I can think is coyotes. It's going to get cold.
I like where your mind's going.
Yeah. Well, I'm a survivalist at heart. No. What horrible way I'll die, and then try to prepare for it.
Yeah.
Basically by just being anxious, but whatever.
That's the way to go through life. Just constant anxiety.
It's like, I'm preparing for it. How? I'm just anxious.
This is why I'm prepared.
Yeah. So she doesn't have a home, or she doesn't have a room at her dad's. She doesn't have a room at her mom's.
Mm-hmm. She doesn't have a place.
No. It's very obvious to her and the audience that nobody wants her, really. And
They wanted her at the residential treatment, but but she chose to leave. Yeah.
and also no running water. And gave her like a chamber pot.
Yeah. She's like, I feel like that would be easier than stumbling in the dark. Okay, great.
And then and no electricity. Mm-mm. And it's just like, is this their version of scared straight? Because I'm terrified.
I just feel like they think that is
peaceful.
Peaceful, yeah. Her mom is automatically assuming that Ellen is not going to want to be, that she's going to be okay with this because she doesn't want to be maybe near her and Olive. But I don't know why she just can't see that her daughter's craving her love and stuff like that. I mean, I think maybe Judy sees it on some way because after she invalidates Ellen changing her name to Eli by saying, it was her great-great-great-grandmother's name, Ellen has no connection to her, and she's kind of invalidating that decision she's making. And I don't know if this is self-serving, where she's trying to own up to her part and how Ellen has kind of ended up this way. Judy says to Ellen, I didn't hold you enough. I didn't bond with you as a baby. She says that I didn't know about postpartum depression.
Mm-hmm. Judy brings a bottle.
Mm-hmm. Of rice milk or rice water.
Yeah, with some sort of nutrient thing in it. She brings a bottle out because her friend had told her to try to refeed Ellen.
Yeah. I mean, that's a type of therapy. It's kind of...
Made me think of rebirthing.
That's all that kind of stuff is debunked. I mean, speaking of Law & Order, which we brought up earlier, there was an episode of how rebirthing went wrong, but...
I remember that episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably the only reason I know anything about it.
Listen, I think it introduced a lot of people to the rebirthing concept, but it's debunked. It's not, there's no methodology to it, so.
The person who told her to refeed her, I think she called her a healer.
Yeah.
So I think it's all very nature-based and
hippie, yeah.
Hippie. And at first, Ellen's like, what? And, rightfully so.
Right.
I think her mom is really trying to connect to her and try to heal something that she had broken in her.
Right.
And eventually, Ellen acquiesces and asks her mom in this sad voice, like, Mom, will you feed me?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think Ellen is trying to meet then Judy on her level as she's trying to connect, because Judy pulls away when Ellen is not really going for it, right? Like
she just leaves.
Yeah, but then I think Ellen breaks down and kind of gets up after her mom and asks her to do that. And I wonder if it was the words that Judy said to her before she's gonna walk out of the yurt, before Ellen stops her, because she says she can't keep fighting. She says, Ellen, it's your choice if you want to die, and she accepts it.
So after that, Ellen, I thought at first it was a dream.
It's supposed to be a dream.
At first I thought it was a dream, but then it was a hallucination. Because she starts walking out of the tent and ends up in the desert.
Yes.
And she starts hallucinating all of these scenarios.
Right.
Like she and Luke are in the tree, and then she's stopped under a tree. She's telling herself how to get to shade, which isn't, I don't know how real that was.
Right.
But then she has this huge epiphany at the end of this sequence where she looks down from the tree, and in the tree she's healthy. Mm-hmm. And she sees what she looks like. She's naked in the fetal position on the ground below, around the tree. And she says, is that what I really look like? Or is that what I look like?
Right.
And she comes out of it. She wakes up and walks over a few rocks, and there's like a strip mall.
Yeah.
So, and she lived. And then she heads home. I don't know how soon after. But she heads back to Susan.
Right.
And to Kelly. And she hugs them and she says to Susan, I'm going to be okay. I think she had finally decided, I don't want to die like this.
Right.
I want to live my life. But I was confused by the ending. Because I don't know what was going on.
So I am not opposed to fever dream sequences. I love it if it gets trippy. But it doesn't make sense to me that this is how we're wrapping up the film.
She goes home, and then the last scene is Susan and I think Kelly.
Yeah.
They're driving her back to Threshold House, which is... She looks much healthier at this point.
Does she even need the therapy, right? Like...
Well, she goes up and she sees Chloe and I think Lobo, and then the door opens, and you don't see who it is. You see two figures, who I assumed were Beck and Luke. But you can't tell.
Right.
And so the door opens, and the last thing you see is her looking up at the people who opened the door and smiling.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, did she just decide and do it herself? And she's coming back to just say hi? Or is she coming to move back in, but she...
I guess it's left open-ended for us to kind of decide.
I don't like that. I need to know.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like...
The ending was unsatisfying.
It was truly unsatisfying. Like, I didn't know what I wanted out of it. On some level, for hypothetical Ellen, who is a character that doesn't exist in real life, like, I'm glad that she came to terms with realizing how unwell she was and wanting to get better. Like, I'm glad that happened, but I think it was a cop-out storyline-wise of how to get her to that point. Like, she has a hallucination, a fever dream,
whatever
it is, that is her epiphany, and then that's what's going to lead her. Maybe it was the connection with her mom. I mean...
I don't know.
I don't know.
You have no idea how she gets from that, down at that strip mall, to how she gets home, to how she ends up looking healthy and going up to that house.
So this is what I wonder is, like, maybe it is a dream, though. So just hear me out for a second.
Oh,
We see throughout the movie all the different ways that she gets to different places, right? The cab from the hospital to the house. We see her get driven by Susan to these appointments to Threshold. We see her on the bus as she's making her way to her mom's house. But you're right, we don't really see her getting these places. Like, she's not walking through the desert through to the strip mall to her house with Kelly and Susan, her dad. Like,
I guess that the assumption should be, well, maybe not should be, but okay, so she called her mom and Olive, and they came and picked her up, and she decided to go back home because she had things to tell Susan and Kelly. It's like, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know what... The ending was unsatisfying.
Yes.
There was no payoff to watching all of that, which might be when they say it's like fetishizing.
Yeah.
That there's no real point. And so why did we just watch this?
Right.
And it's weird because sometimes if I want a movie on in the background, I'll turn this one on. I'll turn on To the Bone. Because once you know something, you can just whatever.
Yeah.
But I always stop it at the yurt.
Right.
And I never watch the end. So do you like it? Do you love it? Is it okay? Do you hate it?
I didn't hate the movie. I'm not super sure that I like it. Like, overall, I like parts of it. There's moments I like. I didn't hate it.
I didn't hate it either.
No.
And like I said, I watch it every once in a while.
Yeah.
But I do find that now that I'm watching these movies to discuss them and be a little more critical
Right.
and have reactions to them, that I'm like, oh God, this is actually not as great as I thought it was.
Carrie, we'll find movies that we love, but yeah,
I'm telling you, if you ruin Ordinary People for me, I love that movie.
I know. I enjoy it too. I have not seen that one in several years, so maybe rewatching it, I'm going to have a little bit more of a critical eye, like you've been discussing. But
I watch it every Christmas.
But we can have these criticisms and not ruin our, diminish our enjoyment.
Nope, sorry, diminished. I'm diminished. So this is the point in the episode where Kenzie,
Yeah, it's going to be my turn.
it's her turn.
Okay. We need to get the ASMR content that we did not have last time.
Well, that's because we lost that part of the recording.
We didn't know we weren't recording anymore. Yeah, make sure you get it into the mic. There you go. And then I got to ruffle my hand.
We can never record
Pop it
us.
off. Okay, right. Hopefully the mic is picking up my ruffling sounds. Okay, wait. Okay, ready?
I'm ready. Next podcast movie.
Okay. A Long Way Down.
I am so excited.
Which was your suggestion.
It was.
Yep. We added it to the list because Carrie wanted to. So yeah, I've never seen this movie. I'm going to be going into it with eyes unseen. A Long Way Down.
Well, I hope you're not scandalized.
It takes a lot to scandalize me. I am your friend, by the way.
Well, I do like to be a little scandalous.
If you weren't scandalous, I would think something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's somebody.
Something more than usual.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us for our second episode of the Much Madness podcast. Check us out on all the socials. Check out our website, www.muchmadnesspodcast.com. We've got the full list of movies that we're going to be reviewing at some point. Please suggest movies for us to watch. Join the conversation. Thanks for listening.